Actually, what I remember saying, it sort of went along with someone's question about falling in love with the breath, is there's also the phenomenon of falling out of love with thinking. And so my words there are chosen because I think often people don't recognize that they're in love with thinking. And sometimes when they come to Dharma classes, they are aversive to their thinking because they've tried to, meditate in some way and their thought continues to be a dominant experience and they would like to get out of that, and the thoughts continue, they persist. And so, kind of the first layer of this is just the suggestion that maybe you are on some level in love with those thoughts, that they are still where you think it's at, where life is happening. It might be as simple as it's what you think keeps you safe, are your thoughts. And your thoughts of planning, your thoughts of judgment, your thoughts of keeping track of everything that needs to be done. There's that kind of anxious side of the managerial system inside of us that very much clings to thinking. But in that, there's a faith in thinking. We put our faith in thinking. That's what keeps us safe. That's one side of it. Another side of it is that thinking is the most interesting things going on. We like to have our thoughts stimulated by ideas, by stories. And so, after spending many years of our life totally enthralled by the ability of the mind to think, it's really kind of a weird and strange thing that people end up in a meditation class. There's usually some glimmer of a sense that there's also suffering in the mind and there's suffering in the thoughts. And I think that's a large reason why people come into a meditation class. So what I would hold out to you is just to live with the idea for a while, to live with the viewpoint. Again, when I use the word idea here, I'm talking about the way you can kind of deliberately take on a viewpoint towards yourself and your life and what's happening. And it's not an idea that has to be enshrined as a philosophy and embellished with all sorts of arguments in favor of it. Just adopt it and use it as a point of inquiry, really what I'm saying. And just the point of view that I am in love with my thoughts. I'm attached to my thoughts. I want my thoughts to keep going a lot. And just see if that's true. And then maybe a second inquiry. So this is a little bit complex, just to explore that. Who or what would I be without my thoughts? That's a very powerful inquiry. Just drop that into your experience, even right now. Who would I be without these thoughts? The two go together, falling out of love and falling in love with something else. I suggested the breath, but that might be a little too small for what you're falling in love with. You're falling in love with being. And the breath is an anchor within being, but it's really being that one is falling in love with. And when one begins to fall in love with being, one notices that thoughts do an awful lot of work to try to keep this sense of me going, who I am, what I believe, how I'm making it in the world. There's this intense effort to construct something and keep it going. The more you see through that, the more you start to realize that's going on, the more transparent it gets, the less believable it is, the less invested you become in it. Like, oh, wow, what if I wasn't this? If you notice, for example, that you are someone who really wants to see yourself as caring and compassionate, and you're constructing that, you notice you're constructing that, just kind of like, wow, what if I didn't do that? Who would I be without that? Or some other thing that you're very progressive, your politics are good, or you're conscientious, responsible. You can find what those are, the tunes in your mind, and just ask the question, who would I be without this? What I like about that, just answering the question, just floating the question in, is there isn't like an attempt to force it away, force the thoughts away. There isn't an attempt to refute them. There's just this little inquiry that just asserts itself. Who would I be? And then you notice where you go, what happens in that moment. Who am I without this thinking? Who would I be without this thinking? And maybe there's a voice that chimes in, boy, I'd be a whole lot happier. I'm just tired of these thoughts, or something like that. A little the kind of the grumpy, judging, aversive kind of thought. And you can say the same thing to that. Who would I be without this thought? You just keep coming back and seeing what path that is that opens up in that inquiry. And this is not necessarily a quick process, this falling out of love with thinking. We've been at it almost as many years as we've been alive. Though it could have certain moments where you kind of like ka-chung, go to a deeper level with it, There can be sudden kinds of steps down into something through this, but mostly it's a very gradual process. And through it, you may begin to see what all is going on that inside of you, what's going on that you are that isn't about thinking. It isn't about concepts. It isn't about comparisons. It isn't about judgment. It isn't about projections of the future. It isn't about who I am and my identity. Just begin to kind of see that. And then let me know what happens.